So to earn the respect of scouts is hard because they know a fraud when they see one. God, we've had a few frauds, in all fairness. So yeah, so for me it wasn't about, it's about winning personally for stuff, but in the main, if you can get the respect off the fans, then...
When Piers Morgan called Neville Southall nuts, the TV host might have been onto something. Here was a goalkeeper celebrated worldwide, a working-class hero who went from collecting bins to becoming the best in the world. But behind the legend, there was a man who sparked conflict everywhere he went. How does someone so loved become so controversial? Let's find out. Neville Southall arrived at Everton in 1981 for just £150,000. Before that, he worked as a bin man, a waiter, and carried bricks on building sites. He climbed through the lower leagues, playing for tiny clubs most people never heard of. When he finally reached the top, he became unstoppable. He made 750 appearances for Everton, won 2 league titles, 2 FA Cups, and the European Cup Winners' Cup. In 1985, he was named Footballer of the Year. For a goalkeeper, that's nearly impossible. His rise was the stuff of dreams. But beneath this success, cracks started to appear. Southall didn't play by the rules everyone else followed. He was stubborn, difficult, and always seemed angry about something. His greatest strength on the pitch became his biggest weakness off it. The same fire that made him brilliant also made him a problem. The first major explosion came on 25 August 1990 during Everton's season opener against Leeds United at Goodison Park. After a terrible first half, Southall walked out of the dressing room early and sat down by his goalpost, leaning against it in full view of the entire stadium. This wasn't just odd behaviour, this was a public act of defiance. It came just 11 days after Southall had handed in yet another transfer request. The timing made it look calculated and selfish. Tommy Smith, the hard-nosed former Liverpool captain known as the Anfield Iron, was watching from the stands. He was furious. In his column for the Liverpool Echo, Smith tore into Southall. He said Southall was completely out of order and had gone way over the top. Smith argued that Southall was pushing Everton into a corner by constantly asking for a move. He insisted the club needed to deal with him harshly for this disgraceful display. Smith represented the old school of football where the team came first and individual protests were unthinkable. To him, Southall's sit-down was a betrayal of everything professional football stood for. Southall tried to defend himself. He told the Echo that his protest had nothing to do with his transfer request. He claimed he just needed to clear his head after the team played poorly and after fans had abused him during pre-season games. But his explanation sounded weak. The protest looked like a stunt designed to embarrass his own club and force their hand. It didn't matter what Southall said afterwards. The damage was done. He looked unprofessional, disloyal, and impossible to manage. Tommy Smith was right to condemn him. This public show of dissent was just the beginning. Do you think Southall's protest was justified, or was Tommy Smith right to slam him for it? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss who he clashed with next. What made things worse was that Southall wasn't acting alone. He had already submitted 3 separate transfer requests that year. 3. He was clearly unhappy and wanted out, but instead of handling it privately, he made it everyone's problem. And then he dragged teammate Kevin Sheedy into it. Together, they handed in a double transfer request just before the season started. It was a coordinated attack on the club, a 2-man strike designed to hold Everton hostage. Sheedy had his own reasons for wanting to leave. He'd just played brilliantly for Ireland at the 1990 World Cup and wanted to play European football, which Everton couldn't offer because of the ban on English clubs after the Heysel disaster. That made sense, but Southall's reasons were vague. He was just disillusioned, frustrated, restless. It looked like he convinced Sheedy to join his campaign, using his teammate as leverage to get what he wanted. Instead of being allies, it seemed like Southall turned their friendship into a weapon against the club. It was selfish and manipulative. The double transfer request created chaos. 2 of Everton's biggest stars were trying to force their way out right before the season. It damaged the club's reputation and put enormous pressure on the manager. Southall wasn't just unhappy, he was actively making things worse for everyone around him. This wasn't the behaviour of a professional. This was the behaviour of someone who thought he was bigger than the team. But Southall's controversies didn't stop when his playing days ended. If anything, they got worse. He became an outspoken activist on social media, championing causes like LGBT rights, mental health, and support for sex workers. On the surface, this seemed admirable, but when he talked about former teammates who took the traditional route into TV punditry, his tone turned bitter. Gary Lineker was one of those teammates. Lineker had been a top-class goal scorer at Everton, and Southall even called him a nice fellow. But later, Southall started criticising what he called the media gravy train of ex-players. Lineker is the king of that world, hosting Match of the Day and earning millions for talking about football. Southall never attacked Lineker directly with the same venom he used on others, but his words made it clear what he thought. He saw Lineker as someone who'd sold out, who'd chosen comfort and money over making a real difference. The contrast between their post-playing careers is obvious. Lineker stayed in the spotlight, became a household name, and built a media empire. Southall went to work in a special needs school and used Twitter to shout about politics. He chose to be an outsider, to reject the establishment. But was that choice made out of principle or out of jealousy? Lineker succeeded in a world Southall never entered. Southall's activism might just be his way of coping with the fact that he couldn't achieve the same mainstream success. His criticism of the media gravy train sounded less like a moral stance and more like sour grapes from someone who felt left behind. This hypocrisy became even clearer when Southall launched into Piers Morgan. In 2018, Morgan criticised footballer Raheem Sterling for getting a tattoo of a gun on his leg. Morgan said it glorified violence. Sterling later explained the tattoo was deeply personal, a tribute to his father, who was shot and killed when Sterling was a child. Southall jumped to Sterling's defence, but not in a calm or measured way. He called Morgan a prick. Then he said if Sterling had tattooed a massive cock on his leg, it would remind him of Piers Morgan. It was crude, vulgar, and completely unprofessional. Southall defenders tried to frame this as him standing up for a young black footballer who was being unfairly attacked by the media, but that's too generous. This wasn't a principled defence. This was a personal insult designed to grab headlines. Southall could have defended Sterling without resorting to crude jokes and name-calling. Instead, he chose the lowest path possible. He wanted attention, and he wanted to pick a fight with someone famous. It worked. The quote went viral. People laughed. But what did it actually achieve? Nothing. It just made Southall look unhinged and desperate. This is the pattern with Southall. He claims to be fighting for the vulnerable and speaking truth to power, but his methods are reckless and self-serving. He attacks people publicly, uses offensive language, and wraps it all up as activism. The Piers Morgan incident wasn't about defending Sterling. It was about Southall making himself the story. He positioned himself as the working-class hero taking on the media elite. But really, he was just lashing out because he enjoys the conflict. Looking at all these incidents together, a clear picture emerges. Southall staged a sit-down protest that embarrassed his club. He handed in 3 transfer requests in 1 year and convinced a teammate to join his revolt. He took subtle shots at a successful former teammate who built a respected media career. And he launched a vulgar personal attack on a TV personality to score cheap points. This is not the record of a principled man. This is the record of someone who is difficult, disruptive, and impossible to work with. It's easy to see why so many people found him frustrating. But here's the twist. That same difficult, uncompromising nature made him great. On the pitch, his refusal to accept second best, his relentless standards, his absolute determination made him one of the finest goalkeepers the world has ever seen. You don't become Footballer of the Year as a keeper by being easygoing. You do it by being obsessive, demanding, and a bit mad. His individualism, his willingness to stand alone, his refusal to follow the crowd, all the things that made him controversial also made him brilliant. And after football, that same energy fueled his activism. He didn't coast into a comfortable TV job because he wanted to do something harder, something real. His work for LGBT rights, mental health charities, and marginalised communities comes from the same place as his sit-down protest. He refuses to conform. He refuses to stay quiet. He refuses to play it safe. The man who sat by the goalpost in 1990 is the same man campaigning on Twitter today. His flaws and his strengths are two sides of the same coin. So yes, while hatred is a strong word, it's clear Neville Southall created friction wherever he went. But maybe that friction was inevitable for someone who simply refused to fit in. He was challenging, controversial, and often wrong in how he handled things, but he was also great. And perhaps, in the end, you can't have one without the other.